I'm Ethel Burgess. I'm a great-granddaughter of Isaac Hudson Burgess. Isaac Hudson Burgess came to Australia. He brought son Sam with him. So Sam and Annie are from the first family, and the second family was Isabella's, and Isabella brought two girls into the marriage, and they had one son between them. That was William Smith Burgess. He married Clementina Grigger and just joined Grandma at Bankford House. It had been her room all her life. Of that family, there was Mary, married Jack Ferris. Well, they're the last ones to live in Bankford House. Ellie, who married one of the Fullertons, and William Isaac, who was my dad, the timber getter like his dad and his grandfather, and Ken, the first shire clerk here. When gold was discovered, he set up a depot in Gympie. That's when they first started allotting land, so he applied for it. He was allotted Block 1, the first allocation, and I know that some of it was just to the right of the roundabout, but some of it went on down past where the school is, because he actually gave the land for the school as well. It was a shop first off, and then more people were going through, so there's need for accommodation. So if you have accommodation, you have a hotel and you get it licensed out there on the old Gympie Road. There was cedar and timber to get in Mullaney, and they knew that they could get land here, they could take any timber off it. He was well established here by the time he selected at Mullaney, and by that stage Sam had left school and Sam went up and was working in the Mullaney area. There was this special exhibition in London, and people were sending special things from the colonies to say how good the colonies were. He certainly warmed to it and sent a very big piece of cedar timber. Somebody said that you could turn a horse and cart round on the piece of timber. Now, even if it wasn't as big as that, it must have still been big. When the railway came through, they were deciding what they would call it instead of Melham Creek, and he wanted them to call it Adlington. But the explorer Landsborough was wanting to settle in the Caloundra area, so that was a bigger name. So Landsborough got the name. Part of Isaac's land, he called it Adlington Creek after where he grew up in England. Whenever I go across Adlington Creek, if I'm going up to Malula and go up Tunnel Ridge Road, I think, oh well, grandfather, you got your Adlington.
So Melham Creek is moving ahead. It has a community, and it is definitely going to survive. It's now called Landsborough. They're still cutting timber, so therefore they need all the facilities that Landsborough has to offer. Now, the railway line came up. We've got people coming up on the trains going to the new resort of Caloundra. They've got money. They were getting less and less people coming up Old Gympie Road. Now we're talking here just the beginning of the First World War, 1914. Everything was moving closer to where the people were, and the moving was more economical than it was to rebuild. They're not going to walk 600 yards to get a drink. So it was considered that the hotel should be built or moved near the railway line to capture the travelling public. A lot left their building where it was on Old Gympie Road now, and they built a new one. The hotel itself was 2 stories, so there was accommodation up top as well. They built them then with as many as 3 noggings in between the wall. It was on stumps. They got long logs as straight as they could. They would point the ends, and they'd virtually make what we call a skid. The logs were attached very severely to make it very firm, and then they started pulling. They used hand winches, big hand winches, secured to a tree and literally manhandled Now, we're moving a little bit at a time. We're not moving big chunks that's rocking the hotel, because not a bottle fell off any of the shelves because it inched its way. Now, it took 6 weeks to move the hotel. But of course, they had to stop for the night's trading to let the patrons have a drink, or they bashed down the front door to get those bottles on the shelves. Those bullickies and the timber getters used to drink themselves falling down drunk, and the brawls were something bigger than Hollywood, and it used to scare a lot of the townspeople. Now, there were 5 or 6 huge big old growth trees in the way. Unfortunately, they had to come down. Now, some of the ground was undulated, so they could have the skid on one bit, but because it dipped down, they had to actually build long logs on stumps to maintain the level pull. Now, initially they went up the road. They dragged it as far as they could. Then it actually did a right angle, because it then headed through the bush to the location that it is today on Cribb Street.
I met a fella and I started cutting timber the other side of Maloney with this bloke with hand tools, you know. And Jean ended up coming up here, and then after that we got married in 1955. There was a little hut down at the sports ground, and we paid the council 10 shillings a week to... This hut was on, I bought it off a fella for £100, and that's when we first got married, you know. It was a little prefab hut, a bedroom and a kitchen dining room thing there like that, and one little tank. And when I was short of water, I used to carry the water up from the rotunda at the sports ground, had a big tank on it. Percy knew it, had a milk and cream run from Maloney, and 3 times a week he used to drop off a block and a half of ice out the front there in the bag for the old, just an ice chest that we had there, you know. A couple of young people, not long married, with a child or two, no TV or nothing like that, so anyway, no, it was good.
Everybody was in the same
Not many
boat,
people were around here better off than what we were or they were, you know.
Well, everyone was friendly, you know, everyone knew everyone else, and a little bit of scandal went round very quickly, and you know, a real country town.
Titherley's Universal Store was on the corner. They had Landsborough, Maloney, Woombye and Caloundra.
Very old-fashioned, but there was always a chair for you to sit on, I do remember that, and a big long counter, and it always had the smell of material and that sort of thing. They sold everything. You know, they said from a pin to an engine.
I reckon there'd probably say 4 or 5 people working there. You had somebody in the drapery department, somebody in the hardware part of it, you know. It was a big shop.
We're sisters, and Mum's lived here, her parents lived here, Nana's parents lived here.
We live here.
Yeah, Dad's parents lived here. Jack started school last year in grade 1, and he's the 5th generation of us, our family, to go to Landsborough State School.
Well, Dad went to work at 15 or 16 at the railway. He put his age up to get a job.
There you go.
And he went to school here, so it would have been in the early 1900s. Mum left school when she was 13, and she worked at the railway refreshment rooms and then the post office on the exchange. She worked down there all through war with the troop trains coming through and all of that, but she was still just a bit of a kid, really.
Mum and Tuppy pinched the railway, what did they call it, the railway trolley?
Oh, the trolley for the baggage, you know, off the train.
And because Dad was a porter on the railway, they went over and they snuck it and they pinched the railway bell, and they dragged it all round town ringing that the war had finished. And that was their big thing. And old Granny went, she's leaning out the window telling them to be quiet. We don't
She
want
wanted to get to sleep.
She wanted to get to sleep. Round the town they went ringing it. I could see them doing it too.
Mm.
That's loud. That would have really woken Landsborough up, hey?
Well, our grandfather would have rung that quite a bit.
My family has been here, well, I've been here 70 years, so probably 90, 100 years in the area. And we lived at the top of Tunnel Ridge Road. The land down there was part of our family farm when we were kids. And there was 11 kids, so you didn't get to go out that much, you know. Once or twice a week we might come to town, and we walked to school from there. But at the same time, Dad worked at a sawmill down Hardwood Road because the farms weren't all that profitable, you know, so the kids had to work to keep it going. We made cases for fruit, you know, the wooden cases, but you just did those things, you know. There's no, I'm not doing that. I worked at the refreshment rooms later on. It was fun to see all the people on the train. 10 minutes, sandwiches and coffee and tea. Yeah, you were running the whole time. Yep. All the sports were done at Glasshouse, and we went in a truck with seats from school put up and down the sides.
And we'd all sit there and go through town with the war cries. But we just hated Beerwell. They were red and black, and they seemed to have a bigger school. You just hated them because they always won it. Beerwell, bit by bit, ought to be dipped in shit. Landsborough, brave and bold, ought to be dipped in gold.
It's gone too quick, so it must have been fairly interesting, our life, you know. We haven't got a lot of bad memories, have we, Jeannie?
No, I have not.
So when I look
We
back,
did a
when
lot
the
of
way
nice
we're
people.
decrepit as we are now, and I'm thinking, God almighty, I never thought I'd get to this stage.
We lived at Beerwell for a little bit. We went to Caboolture, but it just was, yeah, it just wasn't us, you know, and we moved back here.
I moved to Beerwell once, lived there for 4 years and broke me neck to come home.
Yeah.
You come across Lake Bridge and you smell that stinking Roger and you know that you're in Landsborough.
Yep.